Siyo Cherokee. Welcome to Cherokee Stories. I'm your host, Phil Bange. If you'd like to come on our show and be interviewed and tell us your story, your family history, please email us at cherokeestories@hotmail.com. Welcome to our show. With St. Patrick's Day coming up, I thought I would pull some of our stories on little people together and then add in some more information. And looking into YouTube, I found a show with a couple people being interviewed about little people in our traditional homelands, and I want to play that for us. And then I've got a couple more personal stories. One is evidence of little people, and then one is something else that I think is related to little people. And it's just an exciting subject, and with St. Patrick's Day coming up, I thought it'd make a good show and be enjoyable to our listeners. Before we go to this recording, let me share with you an experience I had in Washington State along Highway 2. This was over near Index. At first, we were going up there because we heard about a Sawyer having seen a Sasquatch up there. So on one of the days that we were collecting evidence, we did find lots of footprints. One time it was in the snow, so we got to measure a flat-footed 19-inch footprint, 6 inches wide. We were hearing footfalls at night, something that sounded bipedal running around, and whistling, barking, things that sounded more like human sounds than animal sounds sometimes, and tree knocking. We heard trees being pushed over, all sorts of things. On one of the days we were up there during the daytime with full light out, there was some snow up there. We couldn't get up a dirt road very far. It was too much snow on the road. So we walked up this road, and there were no vehicle tracks, but we ran into footprints that were the size of 4 or 5 year old. And I brought this up to my friend just the other day to kind of refresh my memory. I was remembering shoes. He remembers it looked like moccasins. And these footprints came out of the woods. There was tons of footprints right in this bend of the road. And they went back into the woods. And we were thinking, well, you know, if these were kids, where's the adult footprints? There's no vehicle around, and it looks like a 4 or 5 year old, where there were no evidence of prints from an adult in the area. It was baffling. And so it always, both of us have little people stories in our traditional background of our tribes. He's Turtle Mountain from North Dakota. So we were, we kind of went there just dismissing it like, what else could it be? There's no adults around here. And it's wintertime. It's not, you don't leave a child out there like that. And then there was another experience in Mexico. Okay, that first one and with the footprints, that was around the year 2000. Before that, maybe around the same time, year 2000. I was down in Mexico in northern part of Veracruz. We went on a walk outside of the village out of Papantla, which is near Tajín. Tajín is the thunder god from the old times. Tajín is like 1,000 years old at least, probably going way back before that with pyramids all over the place. So we were on this dirt path going back to where there's ranches and things. And she starts talking to another lady dressed in the very traditional clothing you see down there. Very beautiful clothing, beautifully colored, and a lot of people speak the language Totonaco down there. So they're talking, and I'm looking behind us, and I see, looks like a child about 3.5 feet tall, kind of whipping his shirt around, and then I turn to look at them talking, and then I turn around again, and this child's gone. I can't see him. And I'm thinking, where did he go? And it's not like there was a jungle or lots of trees around. It was kind of grassy, and I'm looking onto these pastures, and I can't see where this kid went. So I asked Irma, and her friend she was talking to, the neighbor. And Irma and I were engaged to be married at the time. Or we might have been married by that time. I can't remember. So she and the lady was looking towards Irma and looking up that trail also. And she says, I never saw anybody up there. And I said, yeah, there was a boy walking down the trail just 75 yards down that way. And they said that they never saw anybody that way. She was looking down that trail and there was nobody there. And so then there was more to the story. I heard that several children had disappeared in that area, and they would be gone for a month. Families would be just really, really worried, like, where did my child go? And then their child would show up a month later. And even Irma's uncle disappeared for a few days and came back. And each one of them said that they followed a child along that part of the path, and went somewhere and came back. And I could get into speculation about that, but I'm just going to try to stick to more factual things. And so that was my experience there. Pretty entertaining. It's just really interesting story. I saw a child there. They didn't. I don't know if they just missed him or what. But that was the rest of the story, was Irma telling me about children disappearing in that area and then showing up again a month later. So now let's go to our interviews, and I'll give you a description. This is from Earth Ancients, The Ancient History of the Little People. This was published February 2nd, 2016. And I'm not going to play the whole thing. There could be copyright infringements. I'm just going to play a little part of it where she talks about Western Carolina University. So it says here, linking the high civilizations of the Pleistocene to the golden age of the great little people, Susan Martinez reveals in The Lost History of the Little People how this lost race was forced from their original home on the continent of Pan, known in myth as Mu or Lemuria, during the Great Flood of global legend. And then the other part of this is Cherokee Little People Were Real by Mary Joyce was written to help preserve a unique bit of American history, a history that captivates the imagination. The book features testimonies of men who discovered ancient little tunnels, small skeletons, and even a child-sized skull with all its wisdom teeth when they were working on early construction projects at Western Carolina University in Caloe, North Carolina.
I do want to mention this theme of historical editing seems to run through any type of humanoid that is discovered. In the last couple of weeks, we've had people talking about giants, and the Smithsonian just keeps coming up in terms of removing complete skeletal remains from excavation sites, taking all artifacts related to a burial site and just picking them up and leaving. And it sounds like it's the same thing with the little people. There's just no evidence in any museum that
I can give you another example that I've seen, here firsthand. And that is, I was contacted by a man who was in college at the university here in right around 1999. And he said that he and some of his buddies were down by the river just goofing off. And the head of security for the university came by, and he had a box that he described as looking a little bit larger than a shoebox. And the head of security actually got engaged with a conversation with these guys because they were curious about what he was doing. And he said, well, they keep finding these little bones when they're constructing new buildings. And so he was taking this skeleton off to be reburied on a ATV trail. So and the motivation for this is they didn't want to stop their construction projects.
Right.
So they simply took them off and buried them somewhere else. Yeah.
That's interesting. Susan, can you tell us why they seem to be a race or a culture that wants to tunnel? Is that because possibly their ancestors may have dealt with some environmental issues that were unpleasant on the surface, flood, deluge, radiation, or something that would push them underground?
I think the question of tunnels is complex. Yes, it could be environmental. There's some information on that, but I would take as a starting point what Mary Joyce mentioned, that the tunnels were found inside 3.5-foot high tunnels were found connecting areas of the what was it, Mary Joyce?
All of those tunnels, it's a network of them that are where the Western Carolina University is now. Is that what you want to know?
Yeah, inside the mounds.
No. No, they were underneath flat ground. There was only 2 mounds reported, and they seem to be essentially piles of dirt from these tunnels being carved. So they, at least here, it seems like they live totally underground.
Mary Joyce, what would be the explanation for living underground? What would be your guess?
I know one of the. Well, let me tell you this. I interviewed a woman who was the great-great-granddaughter of Solly. Solly is a Cherokee hero, and she said she felt like the little people came from the stars, and you know, they might not have been able to tolerate the intensity of our sun or the brightness of our sun. I mean, that could be a possibility. But the Cherokee themselves believe they came from the Pleiades, so the star origin is very much a part of the little people and the Cherokee culture.
I would like to add the element of persecution, because when you follow...
And there you go. Very interesting, right there at Western Carolina University. You can look this up on YouTube and listen to that in its entirety. I couldn't help that thunderclap after talking about Tajín. So now I'd like to go into some previous episodes, and we read some of the traditional stories from Friends of Thunder by Jack F. Kilpatrick and Anna G. Kilpatrick. Welcome to our show today. I'd like to tell some stories about the little people. Now, so I've been around some friends of mine from out around Seattle area, Northwest area, and once in a while we talk about little people. You hear a story about somebody feeding them in their yard, or one friend of mine was from Oklahoma, and he told a story about being out hunting. Actually, this story was told to me over 20 years ago, but he's from Oklahoma, but I think he was in Montana with his wife. His wife was Crow, and they were out hunting, and they got a deer, but when they trailed it and found it, and I may be getting the story a little wrong, it's been 20 years, but I think they shot it and then had trouble finding it, and when they did, they saw a little person attending to the deer. And so they took their deer, but when he reached in to clean it, it burnt his hand. That's what I remember about this